Welcome back, St. Paul's School and or other curious students looking for some help with literary devices and To Kill a Mockingbird. Let's pick up right back where we started. So last video we finished notes on the first 3 literary devices that you'll be analyzing. So those were diction, tone, and mood. But now we are moving on to think about symbolism in the novel. So again, I assume you are ready to go and take some notes. So let's get that definition for symbolism here. Give you a moment to pause. Okay, so symbolism, which is both a figurative language device, so creating art in literature, right, but also especially deeply character driven and help develop characters in particular, though it really can also be a plot device, but I find that these are the two that are more often or generally come up easily. Symbolism is the use of objects or things, something physical, to represent a deeper, more significant idea worth exploring. So symbols are objects, physical things, but they represent a bigger, more or less tangible or touchable idea. So I think that there's a lot of pretty easy and obvious ones. Like chapter 10, for example, has the mockingbird in it, right? But I wasn't going to pick that for your example. I picked a slightly more obscure one, and that is Atticus's glasses, which on page 110 are dropped in the street before he shoots the dog Tim Robinson. Tim Robinson? No. Tom Robinson, Tim Johnson, the dog Tim Johnson. In order to analyze this, again, just a quick reminder, when we are analyzing, we are looking at 2 things: how the device is shown and to what effect. And I've separated out my examples with and without the underline so you can see kind of how I do these things. So how is it shown? Prove that it exists, and prove that it does something for the reader. So in our case, in order to prove that it's shown, I wrote how Atticus's glasses are pushed up onto his forehead before they fall to the ground and crack. He grinds the lens under his heel once he shoots the rabid dog. His glasses are a symbol, a lens, representing one way of seeing the world. When these are broken, Atticus changes his perspective and helps the town, and Jem and Scout's perspective of their father is forever changed as well. Therefore, this symbol helps develop the theme of innocence as well as perspective. So in this case, when I talk about how a literary device can be used as a figurative language device, I'm talking about how these literary devices can be used artistically to deepen our understanding. This often means developing a theme or supporting other literary devices. And that is probably the hardest, but also the most worthwhile and important lesson I can teach you through this, is that literary devices create thematic meaning. So that's how I show this here. First, I prove that the glasses are a symbol, and they are symbolizing changing and broken perspectives, right? In doing so, I then talk about how this develops that theme, that when they're broken, it changes his perspective, helps the town, changes his children's perspective, and the symbol develops the themes through that. This therefore sentence does a lot of work for me, closing up my argument as a little conclusion, right? Feel free to use that transition to help you create strong conclusion sentences for your analysis. Cool, that's symbolism. In your chapters, you've got 11, 12, or 13. 11, you have some particular imagery from Mr. Bose's chapter. I probably covered some of that in class, so I don't want to give you too many hints. In 12, think about the church, right? And then, I'm not going to give you any hints on 13 either. All right, imagery. I'm going to create some space so this all falls on one page here. Imagery is a figurative language device as well, but it also helps plot, especially because this is how we see what is happening in the novel. So a lot of times it clarifies what's really going on in the plot. Once more, I'll copy your definition here and I will shush so that you can pause. And we're back. The use of sensory language, diction, and other figurative language devices, which include things like pacing or similes, etc. So the use of literary devices in their own right as techniques, right, to paint a mental picture for a reader. This idea that it is sensory, your five senses, taste, touch, smell, sight, and sound, is particularly important. This is, Harper Lee does a great job painting pictures through sound, but pacing similes is not just it. Like, we can also add alliteration, etc. There are tons of different literary devices that help us imagine a particular place. Consider how we see Mrs. DeBose in all of her grotesque glory in 11. Or my example from chapter 10, I don't remember, which is on page 62 after the page break, says, every night sound I heard from my cot on the back porch was magnified threefold. Every scratch of feet. The chinaberry trees were malignant, hovering, alive. This whole paragraph, which I ... out the center of because it's long, you don't have to include like a whole paragraph. I want you to include like a bit of it, right? But this paragraph paints a vivid picture of how fearful Scout is of Boo Radley. And she is using diction, consider that they are malignant or evil. She's using mood by making me feel creeped out, right? The night sounds are magnified. She's using metaphors. I don't think it's in this section, but believe me that there's a metaphor there. And pacing, it moves so slowly. So I've proven that it exists. The imagery emphasizes these other literary devices and creates the effect of figurative language. That through imagery, we emphasize these other literary devices. We create this effect of figurative language that helps me picture the moment. Beautiful. This one should be nice and easy. So I actually suggest maybe even waiting on imagery. I know it's fifth in line, but maybe you actually do this one last and look at how many quotes you have from chapters 11, chapters 12, and chapters 13 and pick, because let's say you have a lot from chapter 11 and a couple from 12, but none from 13 yet. Maybe imagery is where you pick up on for this one, right? Because this is an easy one to find in any of these three chapters. Similes and metaphors. Similes and metaphors I've grouped even though they are their own distinct literary devices because they are both comparisons, right? So the idea of using a comparison in order to create a deeper meaning. There's your definition. Sweet. So similes and metaphors use language to make comparisons between unlike things. Similes use like or as, metaphors do not. Often just is. So these are actually, especially similes, she's really quite clever about inserting these, are all over the novel. They're just so subtle and beautiful, and we recognize them as creating an image in our minds that we often don't even pause to note them. So this is where kids most often complain to me that they struggle to find one of these in chapters 11, 12, or 13. However, without you guys knowing, I secretly counted, and there's 4 or 5 in chapter 11 alone. So make sure that you are really rereading closely. Close reading is a major important skill in your life, looking for these comparisons. We're either using a like or an as, or using just a straight is. My example is that the tire bumped on the gravel from page 42, scattered across the road, crashed into a barrier, and popped me like a cork onto pavement. This is a simile. It's comparing Scout's tire ride to a cork from a bottle. There, I prove that it exists. I have told you what my comparison is. It gives the reader a sensory image of just how forceful the moment is. So, it's a figurative language choice. Similes can also tell me more, and metaphors can also tell me more about characterization. The one that immediately comes to mind is when Scout compares reading to breathing. That teaches me who she is as a person and is a beautiful way to convey who she is and what she values without needing to straight up write, I like to be smart, like excellente. All right, that means I think we've done 3 so far, right? Yep, we did symbolism, imagery, similes, and metaphors. We're going to do one more in this video, and that is a tougher one. It is point of view. Point of view is not tougher because you don't know what it is. You guys have been studying what a point of view is for quite some time. It's just that it is interesting that I'm using it as a literary device because we also have the theme of perspective. but they are two separate entities that sort of tie together and work together with each other. So one more time here, I'm going to copy your definition. Stop talking for a second. Whoever is playing this video can pause it. And I'm back. So point of view is the mode of narration that an author uses to let the reader hear and see what takes place in a story, poem, or essay, or any written expression. This can impact how the reader experiences the situation. For example, To Kill a Mockingbird is in first person point of view, and Scout, as a narrator uses I. In doing so, in choosing to tell this book from Scout's point of view as a 6 to 8-year-old girl, our author has placed the reader in the point of view of a young girl growing up in the time. Through using this point of view, we're able to learn more about different perspectives. So that's what my note here says. It says, this is different than exploring the theme of perspective. Point of view as a literary term is more about how we experience a situation from Scout's point of view, and her perspective is the deeper analysis of how she changes the way she sees the world, and therefore changes how we see the world. So another way to think of this is the idea that sort of we have a point of view of characters versus perspective gained by a reader. So the character's point of view can change our perspective. If that's a little confusing, I do have an example to show you. And again, I know I'm not there to guide you through these or to show you or like, be right next to you. So you're just going to try your darndest, right? Per usual. You're amazing and very smart. Believe in yourself. Fake it till you become it. But my examples on page 33 at the bottom of the page, I wrote, or rather, I chose the quote said by Scout, but it's not included there. It's Scout says, "I don't see why I have to when he doesn't." So my analysis states that from Scout's immature point of view, she does not understand why the Yule family acts the way they do. So this is in reference to the fact that Burris Yule does not have to go to school, and his family doesn't really have to abide by the rules of the town, right? Because Scout's too young to get it. So she doesn't understand why the Yules act as they do, nor does she understand why the town allows it. Atticus uses this moment to help change her point of view to be more understanding of the situations of others, which will be important later. Wink, wink, that's some foreshadowing. This also changes how the reader views these situations, developing the themes of immaturity and maturity and perspective. Because as we see Scout changing her point of view, right, our perspective changes. So prior to this moment, we've been using like perspective pretty interchangeably. But now I'd really like us to start clarifying that Scout's point of view helps us to learn more about how perspectives change. Her point of view gives us a lens into the themes that are being developed. So you are going to look for a point where someone's point of view teaches the reader something about perspectives. And I'm highlighting 12 here because I think chapter 12 is quite rich for this, but 13 could do it too, and 11 definitely has this lesson, right? Okay, so that is all for today's. We still have 3 more literary devices to go, as well as some extra notes that we'll just type together in the next video. In that final video, I'm going to go over the rubric at the bottom of this assignment and tell you that you're going to be awesome, child who is learning about literary devices in To Kill a Mockingbird, which may or may not be a St. Paul's School student in the year 2023. I adore you all, and this is Rose signing off once more.